This is BJJHOOD, tapping into Jiu Jitsu lives on and off the mats.
Hello. We are back with the BJJHOOD Podcast. I'm Babi, your host.
Shae, your co-host.
We're here to share inspirational stories about women in Jiu Jitsu and how the martial arts changed their lives. You know, already all of our episodes are coming out on Thursdays. We have the episodes on YouTube with subtitles in Portuguese, and we're also on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast platform on YouTube so you don't miss any of the new episodes that are coming out every Thursday. Make sure you also follow us on Instagram so you can have some information, see some snippets of the interviews on the week prior to the interview to go out on Thursday. We're everywhere as BJJHOOD Podcast. Your support is really important, so make sure you are always sharing the episodes, sharing the snippets that we post on Instagram. That way we can reach more people and we can share the stories of these women to more people. Today we have Jessica Crane. She's a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt from Dallas, Texas. She's only 22 years old and has been training since she was 6. She got her black belt about 1.5 years ago, and she has a lot of competitions under her belt. We're going to talk about it with her. We're going to touch a little bit on her personal life too. So I just want to say, Jessica, thank you so much for coming today and talking to us here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. So we wanted to start asking, like, you started training at a super young age. How was that beginning? Like, who brought jiu-jitsu into your life?
Okay, so I started training when I was 6. So I feel like every time I tell it, it's so complicated. So my mom used to work at a school, and one of her coworkers mentioned that her husband was going to start a gym. He wanted my brothers to start it. They used to do baseball. And so he got my brothers to start. My dad ended up starting. They did a class. And then I remember like so vividly that I was at Target and my dad called my mom and he was like, "Hey, I want the girls to do jiu-jitsu." And my mom said, "No, like it's not gonna happen." Like we were doing ballet and tap dancing. Like he's like, my mom was like, "No." And my dad was like, "Let Jessie like do a class." And so I did one class and I like loved it. And after that, I don't even remember ever doing ballet again and just did jiu-jitsu after that. And I just like loved it after that. That was like my thing. And then a little bit later, my sister started as well.
Do you remember what was about jiu-jitsu that made you fall in love so much? Because I think about, like, for me, when I don't remember anything when I was a kid. Like, I can't think about the things that I liked that is 6 years old, for example. Like,
Yeah.
do you still have that memory? Like, what made you fall in love with it?
Honestly, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it was like the team environment too. Like my coach like was so like dynamic with the kids. Like and I was like a really shy kid. Like I wouldn't really talk to anybody. I was very quiet. So I think it was actually really surprising that I liked it so much. And I think also because like my siblings were doing it, like my coach was like always like having fun with the kids. Like that's one thing I really remember. But I don't even remember my first few classes, but I just remember, like, always, like, being so excited to go and, like, having so much fun when I was there.
That's awesome. And when did you realize that that's what you wanted to do for life? Like, that you wanted to start focusing on competition and focusing on that jiu-jitsu life?
Well, like, when my mom was really good about, like, pushing me, like, she is, like, one of my hardest, like, critics, like, ever. Like, she keeps me so humble. And she, like, always would have me compete as much as possible. There'd be times that we'd go to a tournament and I was just like, "Oh, we're just gonna go watch." And she's like, "No, your geese in the car, like you're competing." Like
Yeah.
she would just like always be ready, or we would go and then someone would need an opponent. She's like, "Oh, my daughter can. Like we have a gi, we have a no gi." Like she was
Oh, how
always
funny.
like ready and my first coach and his daughter, she's a bit older than me. They would travel all the time and compete, and I remember I would always see them competing. They would go all these different places. They would go to Brazil and Japan and like every state and do like every open. And I was like, "Oh my God, like they're always winning gold medals like every weekend." And then I remember I did a seminar, like Leticia and Bia came to our gym and did a seminar, and I was like, "Oh my God, like there's these like women and they're black belts and they're like so amazing." And like so when I started like while I was getting older, like I was more and more passionate about it. And then I think when I started doing like juvenile, I was like, okay, this is something like I really want to do. And I'm always like I always try to stay pretty like realistic. So I'm like, okay, let me see like how I'm doing, and like if I'm competing and I'm doing well, let me keep trying to nurture that. Like if I was out there and I'm a juvenile, all the club I'm like getting destroyed, like okay, maybe let me go to college. Like, but but I was like going out there and I was doing really well, so I was like, okay, let me keep doing that. And I started wrestling in high school to help my jujitsu. I hated wrestling, like I hated it. And my mom was like, no, you're gonna do it. So I started wrestling when I was 8, and she's like, you don't have to compete until high school, but you have to do it. And in high school, I did it for my entire high school. And then when it came time for college, I think I was a COVID baby, so like I didn't. My senior year kind of got cut off because of COVID, so it ended up being like online. And I was like, well, COVID, and also like I'm like, let me just take a year off. Like I kind of use that as an excuse to kind of get my mom to like agree. I'm like, let me take 1 year, just 1 year, and let me see how my jujitsu goes. And when I'm 100% focused, I don't have school, I don't have wrestling, just jujitsu. And so I was like, I trained, and then I was like, you know what? Okay, I was like, maybe I should go to college. And then like right after that was like my first time on Flow rankings, and I'm like, no, see, mom, like look, it's working. And since then I've been like actively being like, okay, let me try to take this full time.
That's amazing.
What was about jiu-jitsu that you loved more than wrestling?
I
Since you've
started
done
with
both pretty heavily, so from a very young age.
Yeah, I've always loved like jujitsu. Like I've just always had fun with it. Wrestling is just like it was just not like it was more something I did supplementally, and like so every time, like every time I've ever done it, I've always thought of it like, hey, I'm using this to improve my jujitsu. It's a very very tough sport, and I respect it, and I definitely needed it like to make me tougher. I've just like never been on the mat and been like, oh, this is like my thing. Like this is like more of like I don't know. I just jujitsu. I have more fun with it. I think it's like it's easier to change up than wrestling. Like if I'm getting bored in gi, I can do no gi. If I'm getting bored like on bottom, I can play top or that. Like there's so much. Like I feel like there's so much to learn, and like it's also different because you have the belts. Like you have like okay, I can like kind of
So you
see
can
my
have goals.
progress versus like at wrestling, it's like there's no like ranking type system except for like
Competition.
the yeah. So I don't know. I've always like loved jujitsu and like wrestling. I had fun with it. Like I won state when I was a sophomore. I like placed every year at state, but it was just like never anything I was like, okay, let me keep pursuing it like besides like what I had to.
Well, you know what? I love that your mom in the beginning was like, no way my girls are not doing jujitsu. Like,
Yeah.
not putting them through that. And then
And
right after, she was the one like, no, you are doing it. Like,
no, my
pushing you to
mom,
compete.
she is like the toughest, like now she's like the biggest like jujitsu supporter like in the world. Like she is always like she still travels with me to tournaments and stuff. Like she and there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna do that, or hey, I'm not thinking. She's like, yeah, you are. Like, yeah, you are. And I'm like, okay, I'm 22, I'm an adult, but like my mom's telling me I have to do something, so I'm gonna do it.
It never changes. I'm
Yeah.
38 and it still is the same thing. My
No,
mom's still telling me.
I was talking to some of my students yesterday, and like I was telling her we were talking about kids pans, and I was like, well, if you need to, like like she's so talented. I was like, if you need to go, and like I'm like, I'll take you if anything. And she's like, yeah, I want you to take me. I'm like, well, if your parents can come, they need to come. I was like, just so you know, I'm like, I've never won a world title without my mom there. I'm like, she's been every single world title I've ever won, every single big match, whatever. She's been there. She's found a way there. And so I was like, I'm like, she's my good luck charm. So I was like, and her dad reminds me of my mom. So I was like, your dad probably needs to be there. He's probably your good luck charm.
I love
Aw.
that. Yeah, we all need this support, right? I think nobody some people have their coaches almost like a dad for them too, and I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. But I don't think there's anybody in the world that it's gonna support you more, or at least that they should,
Yeah.
than your own family. And if your mom wants to be there and she wants to be part of it and she's pushing you to be better, like there's nobody else that's gonna do that for you, you know? She's
Yeah.
there like just for you. Like she doesn't have any other focus. Like she doesn't have to think about other kids or other athletes. It's just you. It's 100% on you. So I think it's amazing
Yes.
that you have the opportunity to have her by your side on all of those experiences, you know?
Yeah, I'm very, very
D-
lucky. And we've worked on our dynamic like over the years. Like she's very tough. Sometimes I'm like, okay, you need to leave me alone. Let me do my thing. And like we'll be fine. Like in Mexico, she's like, and she's still I love her so much. She doesn't know what she's saying when she's coaching sometimes. So I'm like, like if my coaches are starting to say anything, but when I was in Mexico, like for the Monterrey Open, I didn't have a coach there, and so she's like yelling, and sometimes she's saying something. I'm like, what are you even like saying? But she's such a big fan of jiu-jitsu that she understands like the gist, but she thinks that because I'm a black belt and she was like with me, she's like technically she thinks she's a black belt too.
She's
So
a-
sometimes I'm like, okay.
we need to get mom in jiu-jitsu. Why mom hasn't started jiu-jitsu yet?
She's done it like she did it like for maybe like a week a long time ago, but it's like not her thing. She's more
Not
of
her
like
thing.
a sideline person. I've said I'm like, please get on the mat like one time. I'm like, just one time. Let me just like roll with you 100%. And she's like, no.
She's like, no. I
Absolutely
mean,
not.
she's probably smart because I don't know if I would shoot. No, I'll be outside here eating a
That's
snack
not,
and watching you. That would be
yeah,
my
no,
thing.
that's not. She's like, I'll just be on the sideline and I'll just critique everything you do, but I'm not gonna get on. And that's how it
That's
works.
awesome. I was seeing, I was stalking you on your Instagram and like seeing your black belt post, and you were talking about all the struggles that you and your mom had to go through, like for you to be able to compete.
Yeah.
As you were growing up, I wanted you to talk a little bit about it. Like, what have you had to like go through to be able to be on every competition for you to be able to perform the way that you did?
So yeah, I'm very blessed. Like my mom was such a hardworking person. She's like the perfect person for like me to look up to in like all aspects of my life. Like growing up, like my parents got divorced like when I was doing jiu-jitsu, and I've always had a passion for it. So my mom has always found a way for me to like make it work. Whether like she's like driven like an hour every day to make sure I can go to training, like where I wanted to go to training. She has like worked multiple jobs so that she can afford for me to go to super fights, to go to pans, to go wherever I needed to. She's worked at my gym before. She's worked multiple jobs. She's worked tournaments before. I had my siblings work tournaments before. Yeah, my mom has worked like so hard to like make me like be able to even pursue my dreams, which has made me like more hardworking because I'm like I see how much she puts into me that I'm like I'm gonna make sure that it pays off. Um, and even now, like after she's not even paying for anything anymore, and I'm always like, let me make sure that she never forgets that I don't forget that. And me and her had a really long discussion about that yesterday too, where we were talking and she was like, yeah, we did not get here just me and you. Like there were so many people around me, and I'm very, very blessed. Like people that aren't even my family, people that weren't even my teammates that saw how much I was training or saw how much I wanted to do something and really like nurtured my journey. And that's one thing that I never forget. And as much as I can try to help my students, as my teammates, anyone, I'm like, let me do that because I didn't get here by myself, and nobody gets any to the top by themselves. So it was a lot. Like my siblings definitely like had to go to a lot of tournaments they didn't want to. Ended up doing like, and they've always been so supportive of me. Like, and so I'm always like, okay, if all these people are really working to like put 100% into me, like I have to put like 110% in, so that like one, like I'm not just like giving up on myself, but like I'm not like disrespecting these people that are like putting all this like energy into me. And it's been like an extra motivation. And so even when I have like other personal stuff that goes on, like my mom's always like been my like rock. She's been the one that's like, hey, you gotta keep going, like, hey, this isn't over. Because there have been a couple times in my jiu-jitsu journey where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna quit, and it's never been like because of like a lack of passion for jiu-jitsu. It's been like, oh, personal issues or me being like in my head or something. My mom's like, no, like, well, when I was a kid, like when I was 10, I was like, I'm gonna quit jiu-jitsu. My parents had like just gotten divorced, and I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna quit jiu-jitsu. And my mom was like, okay, if you're gonna quit, you go tell your coach you're gonna quit. Like that, you want to do that, go tell your coach. And I was like, me? Like, I thought you were just gonna go do that for me. Like you were just gonna go let him know. And she's like, no, if that's what you want to do, like you have to go do it. And I was like, I don't want to. And so then I kept doing it, and my mom knew like it wasn't because I didn't love it. And then a little bit later on, as a purple belt, I was like, you know what, I kind of want to quit. And it was more like an emotional thing. I was like, I'm going through something in my personal life, and I want to quit. And my mom was like, she was like, you have a tournament coming up, so just do your tournament, and we'll talk about that later. And literally the next morning, that was like the first time that I was like on the flow rankings, and then a couple weeks later, I got asked to be on Who's Number One for the first time. And my mom's like, "Look, like you see, like you're like this close to quitting, and then you're getting these like opportunities, like." And I was like, "Okay," and then I kept training, and then when I got my black belt, like I was like, okay, I got my black belt. I'm ready to like take a step back. And she's like, "Are you really?" Like, and everybody, whenever I got my black belt, was like, "Oh, when you get your black belt, it's like feels like you start over." And I was like, that cannot be true. Like, I really did not believe that. And now that I got my black belt, I'm like, dang, I really feel like I know nothing. Like, I feel like I'm like completely starting over. And so every like time like I feel like I've started like getting like in my head, or I overthink or whatever, like my mom's literally, I cannot praise her enough, and she knows that. Like she has really been there for me through everything. And also like my team, like every team I've been on, like the people around me like supporting me, like I am nothing without the people that support me. And I say that like every single place, probably so annoying, every competition post says like the same thing, but I truly beat that. Like having like a people around you that support you and like push you, and like it you can ask for anything else.
Yeah, I think that's for everything in life, right? Like
Yeah.
not just in jiu-jitsu or any other sport. It's like you need those people. Your mom is the person probably that knows you the best,
Yeah.
the most, and she knows like if you're doing that because you really want to do that, or if you're doing that because there are other reasons. Like now you
Yeah.
can see that there were other reasons, like other things going around that were probably kind of like pushing you to give up
Yeah.
on something that you really love. But she was like, no, I know that you love this and you want to do this, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna push you a little harder, right?
And because she's my mom, like she's like, okay, like she knows to be tough. Like she's like, I don't really care how you feel at this second right now, because I know like how you think. Like versus like if someone that's not your family, they're like, if that's what you really want to do, then go do it. My mom's like, no,
Yeah.
like cut that out. Like go compete. Like my mom does not, like
Yeah.
she's so tough on me. I'm like, okay, like I'll win a match and I'll like look at her and she's like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, or people like she's like, like I'm like, okay, I can't like I'm like, nothing I do like is impressive. She's like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay. I'm like,
like
okay.
you did your job.
Yeah,
That's what
she's
I
like,
That's so
expected of you.
funny.
just like,
Your mom's
do I-
like my soul sister. That's like
yeah.
who I am.
No, that's how she is. I'm like, I'll like win, and I'm like, and she's like, okay,
Great
okay.
job. On to the next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like
She's
I'm
like,
hungry. Let's go. Hurry up. Get that world championship medal because I want to
yeah,
have a.
that's how she is. She's like, okay, picture. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Next one.
That's awesome. Um, right now, like what do you think are the most important things that jiu-jitsu has taught you until today? Like you talk about like thinking about giving up many
Mhm.
times, like all the struggles that you have been through your whole life. Um, what do you think are the big lessons that you've learned?
I think the biggest lessons that I've learned through jujitsu, one, I would say my health. That's one thing that I would say my first coach and a lot of my coaches have really like helped me with, and like really beat into my head, where they are really big on like taking care of your health, making sure that you're, not only just because of me as an athlete, like so I compete better, but just in general. That's one thing I've been so grateful for, that I've learned a lot about like my own nutrition, about taking care of my body. And I would say that that community that I said again, like there have been a lot of times where I've been like, dang, like I'm very very grateful that I have the jiu-jitsu community around me. Like I've met so many amazing people that I would never have met. And I've had so much support from like strangers sometimes, where I'm like, oh my god, like I never met you and you watch my jiu-jitsu, or you follow my career or anything. And like that is like one of the coolest things to like be like, oh, a stranger's following my jujitsu, and like um yeah, it's very
Encouraging
nice. Or
you.
even my personal
Community.
life, like I've gone through a lot of stuff, and like to have people be like, oh, I relate to you, or oh, like I feel for you, or just reaching out. That's been very very helpful. Me and my siblings talk about that all the time. I'm like, because they still they did jujitsu for a while, so they still know a lot of people in jujitsu. So I would say the health, community, and then I would say honestly, let me think. I feel like I've learned so much in jujitsu. Um, I think just like to be grateful. I've done so many tournaments and I've gotten so much experience and stuff, and like it's never like I feel like been about the medal. I feel like it's always like I'm always learning so much. I'm always like, oh, I'm so grateful to be here and like to do what I love. And I know that there's like a lot of people that have the same amount of passion for the sport as me, but they might not have the opportunity to compete, or they might not have the opportunity to travel as much as me, or to do the things that I do. And maybe they're even more talented than me and they just don't have that opportunity. So I'm always grateful that I'm able to do what I do as like full time, and to just have that ability.
Where does
Yeah.
your sense of gratefulness, because you've said it throughout the entire time that we've been talking, from
Mhm.
your siblings to your mom, to the community, does that come from just how your mom raised you and your dad raised you, from a young age? Like, where is that coming from, and how did you get that?
Um, I feel like maybe it was the way I was raised. I think that because like when we grew up, we like I feel like we struggled a lot, and to see like how many people like out of the just the gratefulness of their heart like have helped me. Like even now, I have so many people that help me, and they're just like, you know what, like no strings attached. I just like believe in you. Like, and I see that and I'm like, oh my goodness, like that is such a pure thing. And like even when I compete, I'm like, dang, like it, like how much it took to get where I am, and like how much stuff you have to go through on like in front, behind the scenes, like on the mats, whatever. I think that like that's one thing that like me and my mom have always talked about, and me and my sister always talk about. It's like I feel like if you don't humble yourself, like you will, the universe, somebody will humble you. I feel like that's like, you know, something I take so seriously is always like remaining humble, because, nobody's the best every single day. Everybody loses, everybody, falls, everybody makes mistakes, whatever. And so just being like, okay, what do I have now? Like what things do I have that maybe somebody else doesn't have, or whatever? It's something I always keep in mind, because jiu-jitsu is like very like it's very hard to do it full time. Like when you have to think about like financially, when you have to think about like physically, like mentally, it's a lot. So for me to be able to like do it full time, I know that like, growing up, when my mom had a daughter, she probably wasn't like, oh, my daughter's gonna do a sport full time. Like she probably didn't think that. She probably was like, she didn't go to college. She's probably a little bit sad about that. But she knows it's my passion, and so I'm always like, okay, like even though I'm not like top of the game right now, I have to remember that I have so much. And like I feel like when you are grateful, it's easier to keep uh, doing better, because you're already seeing the good things, that you just keep like when you look for something good, you keep seeing good, and it just keeps like you grounded. And I think that's very important for like athletes and just people in general, to just always like be pretty grounded.
Yeah. You're talking about the like living off of jujitsu, and I think that's like a thing with the athletes, like how hard it is to keep up. Sometimes it's really hard to like make sure that you're gonna have that money at the end of the month to pay for your rent,
Yeah.
to pay for your bills. Like have you found a steady way of living? I know you have some of the sponsors, you have some good, great, like big sponsors too.
Mhm.
How did you get to that point where you can be like, this is my job and I can really make money? Because I feel that a lot of people, it's their job, but they're not making enough money even to leave. It's like it's always living on like thin line.
I'm still learning, so I don't think people should really. I'm not the one to fully like look up to for that. I'm still learning. Obviously, like I teach classes, I teach privates, I have sponsors, and I always keep up with my social media, because even though I don't make money off my Instagram, I've still like been able to do paid partnerships. I've been able to, because I'm growing a following. It's easier to get sponsors because I have a platform, to get super fights, because I have it. So it's always trying to do like um, I have sponsors that pay me monthly, which is very, very helpful. Plus privates, plus teaching and stuff. It's basically how I do it. But it's like you have to work hard. Like you have to like do like I know like I'll be at the gym and I'll be like taking pictures and stuff. And people are like, oh my god, like she's always taking selfies. I'm like, it's not just that. It's like I'm trying to like post more and like grow my following, make reels, make stuff that is gonna like push my Instagram, because that's more followers, which is not just better for me to have more of a reach for myself, but if I want sponsors, and they'll be like, oh, she can push out the brand to this many people instead of just this many people.
Mhm. It's like it's your part of your job too. Like you have to
Yeah.
market yourself. That's how you're gonna
Yeah, and
get
if
paid
I
for
can
stuff.
show brands, I can market myself. Then they'll be like, okay. If she can market herself, she can market our stuff. Like you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I know how to market, if I'm just posting like every 6 months, and it's like one random like badly shot like tournament photo or something. They'll be like, yeah, I don't really know if she's like the one for us.
Mhm.
But just like, and I'm good about like, I'm very lucky because all my sponsors are like, I really do swear by it. I'm very picky about my sponsors, and if I truly believe in them, like we build like really good connection and everything. And so my sponsors help me out, plus just teaching and privates. But it is tough, like you just have to push through.
Yeah. Is that your goal for life? Like, I know you're young still, you're 22. Like, is that your goal to keep doing jiu-jitsu? Like, what are your plans for your future? Because we know that at some point, like being an athlete, you kind of have to slow that down a
Yeah,
little, especially if you start at a super young age. Your body's gonna start to feel that at some point.
yeah.
Like, do you already have a plan, or you're more like of when it gets the time, I'm gonna see what's gonna happen and see the opportunities?
I'm like a mix of both. Like I definitely have thought about going to school eventually, like and getting a degree in something. Um, but right now, like my focus is like just jujitsu. I've been like really hard on my strength and conditioning, on my tournaments. Like the past year and a half, maybe I didn't get to compete as much. But this year I'm competing a lot more. And I'm just like really focused on that. And then I think when I slow down, like when I start slowing down, I'm going to get more into teaching and kind of see where that leads. Um, but at least for now, for like the next couple of years, really like focus on competing as much as I can and like see, if I want to be more no gi focused, more gi focused, do both, like which one ends up working better for my career, and just kind of try to get as many like titles. And the more years I've gone by, the more I've seen more women are getting paid, more regular brands are getting into jujitsu. More like social media is playing a part in your part of a career. So right now my focus is just competing as much as possible, and then seeing where it kind of leads. And if I'm like, okay, it's not leading where I want to, or somewhere steady or whatever, then start pivoting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think a lot of I'm gonna switch a little bit now
Mhm.
for more like your competition
Yeah,
side and like your preparation for competitions. I think a lot of people struggle a lot in the beginning on their journey, like trying to find their game in jiu-jitsu. When would you say that you like found your game, like you found the positions that you were comfortable with doing? And if you have any tips for people, I mean, I know it takes time, but a lot of people don't understand that, especially when
yeah,
they're starting jujitsu. They're like, but I don't know if I'm better like on top or bottom. And I'm like, you're gonna get there. Like, it's gonna get
yeah.
to a point where you're gonna kind of realize. But I wanted to see from you. You are like a full-time athlete. Like, do you have any tips for them on like how to finding that game, and when did that happen for you?
I feel like I've kind of always like I feel like I haven't really ever changed my game. I feel like I kind of stole my first coach's game and just like ran with it. Like cuz he was like a smaller like guy, like so he always did like a lot of like top game, and like I kind of like took that and kind of made it my own. Um I liked being on top. I feel like for me, I've always felt the best there, and then wrestling was perfect to incorporate that. And then whenever I started getting like blue belt, purple belt, my next coach was like, "You need to start playing guard because you never play guard. Like we need to start building that now." Which I'm very grateful that he did that. But I feel like it's always just like experimenting, because one, I feel like if you're first starting, you need to focus on the fundamentals, because it's very easy to like see something cool on Instagram and be like, oh, maybe I can do that, like blue. And you're like, no, the fundamentals always work. If you watch like the highest level like athletes, they're hitting all the basics. Like they're not. You don't see like all the high level matches and they're doing like these crazy like Instagram reel type content. No, they're like doing arm bars. They're doing like basic De La Hiva sweeps, like basic triangles, rear naked chokes, like stuff like that, where it's like, okay, it's fundamentals. Like those will never ever go out of style. Those are never gonna not work. Like if you have them down, I always am like, focus on fundamentals. Um, and then you kind of see what works with your body type. Like I'm shorter. I'm not playing lasso really because yeah, it's not working for me. Like if I was taller, maybe like I always try to see like if you're faster, maybe you like more dynamic style passing. If you're a little bit heavier, maybe you like pressure passing. It's kind of like figuring out what's good for your body type. I always like recommend like you watching athletes that you feel like have a similar build or height or whatever that you do, and kind of seeing what they do and being like, okay, maybe that'll work for me. Because like I'm not gonna watch like Nicholas Marivali and be like, okay, I'm gonna try that exactly because me and him are not the same size, like at all. Like, but maybe if I watch like, Miso or Fionn or something like that, I'm like, okay, they are similar and I can copy, some of the stuff that they do or kind of make it my own. Um,
Yeah.
but it's always just like playing around with different things, and I think that it's very easy when you're training to like let your ego kind of prevent you from getting better. Like they're like, oh, I beat this person all the time, like I don't want them to pass me in class, or I don't want them to submit me in class. And you're like, okay, rather than do it in class than you do it at a tournament, like rather you learn this skill now in class than at a tournament. And I remember when I was younger, like one of the ladies at the gym would be like, "Oh, always play like half guard," and I was like, "I feel like she's saying this so that she'll beat me. Like, I really feel like she's saying this just so she'll beat me when we roll." But then, like later, I was like, "Okay, I got really good at half guard, like for like," and I was like, oh, "Okay." I was like, "I like." She just saw that I was getting discouraged. She's like, "No, keep playing it, keep playing it." And then I got a lot better at it, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like I needed to lose all those times in class so that now, if I get through the tournament, I feel comfortable, like, and so I think that it's just like, experimenting with stuff, and then also like letting go of your ego in the gym to just try out new things, see what works, see what doesn't, and then just kind of start molding your game, to what you feel most confident
Yeah, I love when you say that because even for I've been training for like 10 years,
in.
and sometimes for me, I'm like I want to fall into my comfortable positions and just
Yeah,
do what I know that I can do like good, just so I don't lose that match. And then a lot of the
yeah,
times I try to think of that too, of like, no, I have to try something different. This is the right time for me to. It's okay if they pass my guard. I'm just trying something. Like I know that
yeah,
I'm trying something new and that I need to like improve and get better on that. And it's going to take time. The same way
yeah,
that when you started jujitsu and you didn't know anything and everybody would beat you up, like right now, it's okay. It's something new. It's going to be hard until you get to improve that. And I think what's funny too, because when you're talking about like the reels on Instagram and stuff that people see, I remember this guy, like a white belt, no stripes, coming to the gym and he was like, oh, how do I do a barato plata from here? And I'm like, man, you don't even know how to do a normal plata. Like,
yeah,
I don't even know how to do a barato plata. Like, I've never even tried. Like, go
yeah,
focus on the position that we're learning today. Like, forget
yeah,
about it because it's really funny. I mean, I know it's interesting when we see on Instagram all those like flying triangles and arm bars. Like, I want to do that too, but make sure that you know at least to do a triangle and nobody like it's getting out of your triangle first. Then you
yeah.
move up and going like fancy and doing other stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm always telling my students. Like sometimes my students are like annoyed because we're like going over fundamentals so much. But I'm like, guys, like y'all are like if y'all are doing them not like good in class, like you're not gonna do them good, at the tournament. Like, or sometimes they'll be like, I don't want to do this, and then like they'll do it lazy. If they're watching this, I hope they understand I'm calling them out of love. And but like then they'll go out and then they'll do it lazy in the tournament. I'm like, no, like y'all need to do it where it's like your muscle memory, like even like if your eyes are closed, even if you're half asleep, like you're doing it right. I'm like, because those fundamentals are what you're gonna need. Like you don't want to have like be a blue belt, purple belt, and you've been training since you were a kid, and you're like, oh, like your arm bar is not that good, and you've been doing it
Yeah.
since you were 6, or your basic knee slice or your triangle, it's not that good. Like no, like you don't want to have to like. It's harder to like fix like when you have like
Yeah.
a your muscle memory is bad than if you just get it right the first time and build that skill. And then when
Yeah.
you once you're like you have all those fundamentals, then you can start playing around with all the like fun stuff if that's your groove or just for a reel or whatever. But
Yeah.
like you'll never go wrong with fundamentals, and that's like something I'm like always tell everybody.
Yeah.
I wanted
Um,
to go back really quick before you switched, Babi. You had said something along the lines of I'm imagining that the woman that you were speaking of was maybe a little bit older that would
Yes.
say play your half guard and you were younger. How was that transition from like a kids class to the adult class and having to go against like older women? How was that transition? Because I do see in our like studio that transition with the kids to the women's class and there's definitely a lot of ego, I feel like,
Yeah.
for them because I think they're going from like a situation where they're always beating the kids and then going into an adult class that's a little bit different. And then even for the older women, right? Like having to keep up with their stamina and how fast they are, it's
Yeah.
a very interesting dynamic. If you wanted to dive into that a little bit.
Okay, so I started doing adult classes when I was 10.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was thankful because when I was younger, we had a really good competition class. So we had a couple other kids that were my age that also did it. So I did have some kids my age that I could train with as well, even in the adult class. Um, it was a hard transition, especially because I'm like, okay, like I'm trying to go against these women and they're like have women strength. And, I'm like a 10, 11, 12, 13 trying to like go against them. And like, obviously it could get a little frustrating. I feel like I've always like held my own. But then like when I'm like, okay, I'm trying new stuff, it definitely got frustrating. And I'm someone that like gets very emotional about my jiu-jitsu. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to do good. And like, I get frustrated. So they were pretty good about like helping me out and be like, okay, like, and one thing that I always keep in mind, and I always tell my students this now, like the girls I train with, I'm like, you're not gonna go against someone harder than me. Like if you're a juvenile blue belt, like me, a black belt, I'm going hard on you. If I'm going hard on you or if I'm going rough on you, like when you go out there, it's gonna feel like nothing. Like you're not gonna feel the same strength from a 15-year-old or from a 14-year-old. I hope not. And then like, and my technique is different. I'm like, and plus, like, we're in the gym. Like, if you have any questions, I'm like, ask me. Like, I don't mind helping you out. I'm like, if you have a question, I'd rather help you. I'm like, because the better you guys get, the better I get. Like, because the better you get, it's gonna make it harder for me. And then, I'm gonna get better. You're gonna get better. And we have to keep like nurturing each other. Um, so it definitely has gotten like a little frustrating sometimes. Where you're like, okay, like I wanna win on my matches, but I feel like you never want to be the best in the room, so I feel like being like having like maybe I can outspeed them a little bit. That was I'm like okay, let me use that to my advantage, and then them having strength technique sometimes that like I'm like okay, let me see. It made me really work on my strategy. That's for sure. Like it'd be like okay, what are my strategy going into this match? Because even now, like I'm gonna fight people that are stronger than me, that are older than me, that are maybe are heavier than me, and you always have to have like a strategy for that. So I think that I always felt like pretty like cool for being like a kid in the adult class. And I think the only thing I really ever would feel a lot sometimes I'd feel bad. I'd be like, oh, I don't want to take away from their training. Like I don't want to like they're adults. Like I'm younger. Like but I think that my team did a good job of being like, no, no, no of course, like they would roll with me, or maybe I'd be their restaurant. Who knows? But they would help me out, and so I think like if I think that doing like the transition can be a little hard, but I think it's really helpful, especially to just get used to that because when I was a juvenile blue, I had just switched to my second team, and my coach was like, "I'm gonna let you do adult blue belt for a year." He's like, "Just because it's different." He's like, "You were going against kids that were your exact age. Now you're gonna go against adults. Like it's gonna be a little bit different." And I was actually like, I was like, oh, probably not. Like, and then when I did, I was like, oh yeah, these women that are like 25, 26, and they've been lifting consistently, and I'm just at school eating like whatever and just doing whatever. Um, it was different. So I think that like for me, I don't know. It's a, w- a weird transition. I think sometimes, but I think that like if the kids are in there and they're responsible and they're like just training hard, like usually it's pretty fine. Like my teammates were very welcoming and
What's your advice to the older women, and then what's your advice to the younger women that are going through that same
um
scenario?
to the older women, I feel like just be like, remember they're younger. Just be like welcoming their kids. I know that sometimes it can get frustrating, because I've been there too, where it's like you're like, okay, just because I'm a girl, like people are like, oh, you roll with the kids, like you roll with like the young people because you're the girl on the mat. I've been there, but I'm always like, okay, well, this kid wants to train too. Like he or she, whatever, they want to train. They want to train. They're probably like because they're the youngest on the mat. Like, and so you can always work on something. Like anyone you roll with, you can drill something if you're going with them. Maybe the older person can work something new. Like like they can drill something that they don't usually do because they're probably going to be able to beat the younger kid. And if they can't, then they can work on their top game and see how it fits with theirs. So I mean, you can always like work something. Like if they're fast, then you can work on your control, working on breaking them down, and being able to like hold them. If there it's technique that you can drill together. Um, I think that like it's just like I don't know. It's just like it's more of a personality thing of like who like personalities mixing and stuff. But honestly, like the younger kids, I'm always like as long as you're like respectful in class, you're not over here talking and you treat it like it is an adult class because it is. You drill seriously, like it'll be fine.
Yeah, I like that advice of like making sure that you are helping them, and at the same time, you can always learn something. And that's
Yeah,
what everybody tells. You can learn from a white belt, you can learn from a blue belt, you can learn from a kid. Just
yeah.
do your best to like control your strength, focus on your technique. Let's see what you can do from there,
Yeah,
and
like
that's
yesterday I
probably
was
gonna be
rolling
helpful.
with one of our green belt girls that she's amazing, and she I ended up in a position. I asked my coach, but my coach is like a bit bigger than me, so I was like, I don't really. I was like, let me, and I asked her, and I was like, hey, what do you usually do when you like get stuck here? And I was like, I'm just trying to get ideas of like things, and she was like telling me, and I was like, oh, okay, and I was like, thank you. And she's a
Yeah.
green belt. I'm like, but sometimes I like to ask like different people, like, okay, what would you do? What would you do? And sometimes I like to ask like white belt blue belts too because they have like they don't know what you're supposed to do sometimes so they'll just say what their natural reaction is and I'm like okay like I wouldn't have even thought about that because I'm already like okay what jujitsu technique would I do not just like what would my reaction be so sometimes I like to be like okay what do different people do and just kind of mix it together or see which one I like better and work that into my game.
Yeah, I love that. We were talking even before we were recording about like you have a competition this weekend and your goals. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your goals for this year. I've seen you a lot doing a lot of nogi, and I believe that's because you're focusing on ADCC trials. So
Yep.
talk to us a little bit about that preparation and what are your goals for the year?
Okay, so this year I'm doing, or upcoming this weekend, I'm doing Dallas Open in the gi. I didn't have anyone in no gi. Then at the end of this month, I'm doing the ADCC trials, which is my big focus. And even regardless of the results, I'm gonna kind of do more no gi. I want to do more ADCC Opens and kind of just get used to that rule set. In December was my first time doing an ADCC rule set, which was the ADCC Austin and it's very different than IBJJF. So, I did that one, and then a couple weeks ago, I did the ADCC Monterey Open, and just getting that experience. And now that it's a lower weight class, since they added the 55, I feel a bit more comfortable doing ADCC. So I have that one coming up. I'm obviously going to do Nogi Pans, Nogi Worlds. And I'm going to start trying to do more IBJJF gi tournaments. I don't think I'm going to have, I'm not sure. I'm going to try if I'm going to have enough points for gi worlds, but I want to make sure next year I have enough points to do both pans and worlds. Because usually I am gi focused. I get all my, or Nogi focused. So I get all my points in Nogi, and then it's gi season. I'm like, oh, I don't have any points. So I'm just gonna try to compete as much as possible. I want to stay pretty consistent. I'm definitely there's a nogi tournament, I'm probably gonna lean more to that. But I'm gonna try to do a lot of opens so I can do both the gi and nogi. But the big ones for sure are gonna be the trials, nogi pans, nogi worlds, and then hopefully I can throw some super fights in here. I haven't done one in a second, so hopefully I can start doing more super fights this year as well.
That's cool. You were talking about the difference about the ADCC and IBJJF, and what is there is a difference in preparation for that too. Matches there IBJJF. You did a lot of who's number one. You did a lot of super fights in the past too. And I saw some of yours. I think the who's number one is the ones that are like 15 minutes, so that's even more time than
Yes.
IBJJF. That's normally 10. ADCC, there's a total different like rule set. How do you prepare for all those different like little details that goes into every little not every little but every tournament that you go
Yeah,
to?
so I'm like an IBJJF girl at heart, so I feel like I have that like instilled in me that rule set. So for ADCC, I'm always getting used to one that there is 3 minutes where there's no points, and then 3 minutes where there are points, and that's something I have to keep in mind because I'm like, okay, like I don't want to exert my energy and get to all these points, and then I like have no energy, and then there's points, and then that's when the other person starts, getting their energy. But I always try to focus mainly on wrestling for ADCC because you start standing and then you get a penalty if you pull guard. So I always try to make sure I'm I already like wrestling, but I'm always trying to tighten that up. I'm always working on scrambling because I know that it's harder to like get points. So if I scramble more like and force them to chain, then I know you can't chain points. So scrambling is a very big thing for ADCC. Um, wrestling is a big thing, like making sure I'm always aware of the point change. Like when I'm getting ready for ADCC, I'm always like aware of like, okay, how many points would this be in ADCC versus in IBJJF, and like, okay, like what is considered points, what is considered not points. I know in ADCC you don't have to put your knee up for knee on belly, different little things. And I'm lucky because I do know a couple people that are refs. So sometimes if I'm like confused about something, I'll like message them and be like, hey, can you explain this to me? Hey, is this points? How would this work? Or I've even asked them like, hey, what do you think of my strategy for this match that I did or this one? And they'll usually tell me, what they think or stuff like that. So I'm always big about like asking questions and like keeping my game, but being like, okay, let me be aware of like what the rules are. Like for example, when I was in Mexico, um, the girl was recovering and I let her recover, and I was like, okay, there's like a couple seconds before points, so I'm just gonna kind of hang out here for a couple seconds and then start passing because I'm like, if I just wait, then the points are gonna be on, and when I pass, I will score. So I just try to be aware, especially going like the couple weeks before the tournament, and just be like, okay, let me like really focus for stuff like who's number one that are 15 minutes. Then I'll usually start doing rounds in class that are 15 minutes. My trainer is very good about us doing like a cardio based off how long our match time is. He's like, you should be able to go 100% for the match time. Um, so, like for example, the Dallas Open is 10 minutes, so we're doing like a lot of 10-minute fast cardio or 10-minute sprint type cardio circuits. When it's ADCC, we're doing 6 minutes. Like, thankfully, he hasn't helped me get ready for Who's Number One yet, but then that'll be 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, we're always like, I'll do my rounds 15 minutes. Sometimes I'll do like a Shark Tank where it's like a different person every 5 minutes, but I'm in the middle, so I get used to that.
Mhm.
But it's always just like kind of tweaking little things just to get ready for it.
Yeah, that's probably really hard to like get your mind into that specific rule set. I've seen like on social media before, like people doing things that they shouldn't be doing on that specific tournament because they're so used to the rules of like a different type of tournament that they're doing.
Yeah.
So I can imagine of like how hard it is and how much you have to be focused and like making sure that you were even studying the rules of those different types of federations so you can like respect and play on their rules, because that changes too on your game, right? Like how you're
Yeah.
gonna approach your game.
Yeah, ADCC especially, because I know a lot of people like say like, oh, these people are losing because they don't know the rules or they don't know the little like things within the rule set. And so that's one thing I've been really big about, like asking questions on and like be like, hey, does this count? Does this count? Hey, is this like, can you explain these rules to me? Just so I'm aware, especially for the trials. Like I want to
Yeah.
be like responsible and make sure I'm going in there like aware of everything.
Yeah. I just want to ask you, how does your training week look like? You talked a little bit about like your condition training with your trainer. How does like your jiu-jitsu classes look like? How many classes you like to do every week? And outside the jiu-jitsu, like at the gym too, like how do you add that to your training?
Okay, so I usually train mostly at night. Sometimes I'll train during the day. If I train during the day, it's usually like a Tuesday or Thursday. I'm not training today this morning, but I'm gonna train tomorrow to make up for it. And then usually I'll train at night. I'll train at the night classes, and I'll do strength and conditioning Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Normally at 1 o'clock to like 2:15, 2:30. And then when it gets closer to tournaments, I'll go more. Like I talk to my trainer every day. Like he's kind of in charge of like making like me and him talk about my weight. We talk about my nutrition. We talk about my sleep. Like every little thing, and work that into my strength conditioning. And so like even today he was like messaging me. He's like, oh, do you want to send if I don't go in, he'll be like, hey, do you want to send you a workout? Hey, like if you can get this in, get this in. And then when it gets closer, I like to go like maybe 4 times, 5 times a week. But we're not doing like heavy sessions. We'll go do heavy sessions a week, and then the other sessions will maybe be cardio, maybe be like a more sauna and like circuits. But I do a lot of strength conditioning, and then I train mostly at night and then sometimes during the day. Um, and then if I'm not training, usually I'm just resting. I'm just like, let me just stay at home and just chill for a little bit. And yeah, that's about it. Like I'm
Yeah.
pretty boring, I would say.
Resting is part of the training too, so that's
Yeah,
really important. It has to be on your schedule.
yeah,
But you said something right now that made me think. What do you like? What do you do for fun? Again, you're 22 years old. You're young. You have a super like hard schedule of training and teaching classes and working and everything. Like,
yeah,
and you have the competition, so we know that there's a lot involved on like the nutrition part. You can't be eating whatever you want most of the time. You have to
yeah.
follow like a diet and everything. Like where on when you get like to have fun at different like scenarios that are not involving jiu-jitsu, and what do you normally do for that?
So I love to like travel. I feel like and eat at new places when I can. Like I'm always like aware. And my trainer knows I love my trainer. He's very hard on me. And then there's sometimes I'm like, hey, like I'm gonna break my diet for like one meal or something. He's like, it's okay. Like it's fine. Like we kind of always like work around it. Last weekend I went to a music festival. It was like my first time and probably my last time. I would not at that level because like I had fun. But I went with one of my friends. I usually like, just try to spend time with my friends or my family, like, cause I'm always competing. I'm always like training, so I don't get to see them that much during the week. Or like sometimes I'm like I'm every weekend I'm doing something, so I'm like, oh, I don't get to see you guys. So I try to just see them, go eat. I love to like I have a dog. And I love him. I like to like spend time with my dog and just like chill at home. Like I'm very, I would say I'm like extroverted, but also like very introverted. Like um,
You
I just like to
probably
spend
have
time.
to deal with a lot of people in jiu-jitsu, so when you have like some free time,
Yeah,
you're like,
I'm
leave me
like.
alone with my dog. I don't want to like talk to
No,
anybody, like
that's
interact.
really how I am. Like I'm like I go to the gym and I'm around like all these kids that I love so much, but there's so much energy, and then I'm training myself, so I'm like, and then I already did strength and conditioning, and then I'm like dieting, and then I'm like, okay, let me just have a couple seconds where I can just like have some time to myself. Like I love trying new places to eat. I love like going to coffee shops. Like I love like if I can, like sometimes I'll travel and like I love to go hiking if I can. Um but I just love resting, I'm not gonna lie. I just love, like, having time by myself where I'm at home, I could just, like, cook for myself, I can just, chill out and, like, have some just time, just
Yeah.
chill. This After the tournament this weekend, my sister's, like, turning 21, so she wants to go out. I was like, "Okay." I was like, "I'm not really gonna be able to go out with." I'm like, "I'll go out and, like, have fun with you, but I can't really, like, do much." I don't drink, I don't really do any of that stuff, but especially with trials coming up, but in general, like, I'm like, it's not my thing. Um, but I'm like, okay, let me like play. I'm planning this whole thing for my sister's not gonna see this, but and it's already gonna be past her birthday. But I'm planning this whole big thing for her birthday because I'm like, and I'm also competing, so I'm like trying to like plan it and like do it. So, yeah, I feel like when I do have time, I'm just relaxing.
That's great. Jessica, we'd like to finish all of our episodes asking our guests, what does BJJhood means to you?
I feel like BJJHOOD like is like just having a sense of community. Like just like the jiu-jitsu community is so big and there's so many people and it's so important that we all support each other, especially as females, like that we support each other. There's like it's since I was a kid to now, the amount that female jiu-jitsu has grown is amazing. Like there are still girls that like competed against when I was kids that are still training now, and like you know a lot of people like now being a coach. Like I was 6 and now I'm 22, and I coach kids that are my age that were my age when they started. Like that is such a beautiful thing, like a beautiful circle. Um, and just like always supporting each other and taking care of each other, because the more that we help each other and grow, the more the sport's going to grow, the more that we're all going to like people are going to be able to make it financially in jiu-jitsu, be able to have their own gyms, be able to do whatever. So I think it's just like kind of that sense of community and just like nurturing each other and supporting each other.
That's great. Thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us today. It was awesome to get to know you a little more outside of the competition scenario too.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Yeah,
of course. We'll
thank
be looking
you.
forward to seeing you on ADCC and all the next
Yes.
tournaments this
Thank you
year.
so much. Thank you for
For
having me.
you that, yeah, for you that are watching this episode, make sure you share with a friend so more people can get to know Jessica better. Make sure you're following us on YouTube with subtitles in Portuguese for all the episodes, and also on Apple Podcast and Spotify. We have episodes coming out every Thursday, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening. Would you like to share your story? Email us at bjjhoodpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at BJJHOOD Podcast.